Holla ballers and welcome to Preacher's Mail. It's back after about a year since the last time I did this. It has been about a year, but we're back to the stage now where it's just not realistically viable to me to individually reply to each and every email, which is sad. It actually really pisses me off that some of you take the time to send me an email and I just simply cannot reply to them all. As I look at my mailbox right now, there's 450 emails in there from the past couple of weeks. I just can't do it. And it pisses me off. So what is the best way to solve this problem is to simply make a video. And a lot of the questions are similar in nature. That's just the way of things, is people have similar ideas, similar thoughts, or they watch one of my videos and have some feedback related to that. This is also a great place to actually discuss the feedback that we do in the dailies as well. I often ask for feedback via YouTube comments or emails, and sometimes the more impressive information does come from emails due to the fact that YouTube is limited in the size of the reply you can do. So this is a great opportunity to do that, so I'm going to do as many as I can, really. I'm not going to give a schedule to this. I wouldn't like to say one a day, but essentially what I'm going to be doing is showing you the previews, almost, of videos that I am making in the future. As you can see, I'm playing Half-Life 2 Episode 2 in the back of this one, and that's because I need some footage from Half-Life 2 Episode 2 for an upcoming video project. Of course, the mystery is that you do not know what that video is, or why I'm filming it, so you can leave your own guessing to that. So without further ado, let's get into this. The first question I chose was based on the daily we had last week, responding to Killer's post on the Good Book, the Facebook, showing that vodka is pulled out of the World First Race, and the reasons aren't that they're not good enough, it's simply because the requirements to take part in the World First Race are now so obscene. Things like taking time away from work and real life, in order to even have the time, in order to put the effort in to get the number of attempts in early enough to have a chance at being the first guild. The downfall of hardcore, essentially reducing the number of players capable of even taking part in the race, and therefore over time we've just reduced the amount of guilds that are realistically in contention for world firsts, such as 10-man, nobody expects Paragon to lose, and in the 25-man it was basically, is it going to be Blood Legion or is it going to be Method? Of course, you can stick your favourites up there if you wish. Needless to say, one guild in one race and two in another is not exactly a good, interesting race, is it? A one-man race certainly isn't, and a two-man race is barely better at all. In fact, the race situation sucks right now, which kind of demotivates a lot of people from aspiring to become those players. So I chose Chris's response because it was pretty awesome. Preacher, here's my 2 cents on how the World First Race could be changed in order to incorporate guilds who commit less time to the game. Simply have a scoring system for each boss, and for the length of the tier, guilds can compete for top score on each boss. When deriving a score on a boss, you have to consider what makes a kill more impressive. Chris then went on to list a number of points, none of which I particularly disagree with, and then a calculation in order to work this out, and the problems associated with it. I'll leave that in the background for you to read. Now, one of the big issues that most of you fed back to me were they were all player-derived. Player-derived rules don't mean a goddamn thing. One thing we have to bear in mind about World of Warcraft with so many players, and of course the age actual restriction, a lot of people don't realise how young World of Warcraft is aimed at. It's like 11 plus. And 11 plus, you don't really have the wisdom of the world or express your common sense. That's just simple facts. You generally do not have that yet, and you will eventually get it. The World First Race is a good thing. It's a good thing because it inspires players to not only buy the game, new players, fresh blood coming into it, but it also inspires players to become better at the game. Something that's really suffering in World of Warcraft overall is the level of player skill. That's okay. That's okay. It's not a great big deal. It's not like people were awesome in vanilla. It's not like people were all amazing in the Burning Crusade. A lot of people like to rose tint this and think that every player was super amazing when the game was harder. That's just not true. What we did have was more players wanting to be better. That's the difference. We had more and more players who actually wanted to be better. Be that the quest for loot, as of course there was no such thing as normal LFR where you could get basically the same item that looks identical. People can't tell the difference just by looking at your character. A lot of people love that, and I don't blame them either. A lot of people absolutely adore the idea of standing next to somebody else and just being far superior just because of their items. That's normal. I don't think there's anything wrong with that particularly either. I think that's a pretty cool thing, and if it inspires players to play better and be better at the game, I don't think that's worse for anybody. Problem with player-derived rules is they don't mean shit, unfortunately, and you cannot express this out to the real world. You cannot express this to all the players. It doesn't matter what rules you implement. A good example of this is the need before greed system in the 5-mans. Need before greed. That is just a player-derived rule, unfortunately. This is my off-spec item. You cannot roll for it. This is my main spec. Nobody should have any right on this loot except for me. And then suddenly someone goes ahead and needs it and takes it and won't give it to you. It's because it's a player-derived rule. And in fact, it doesn't mean a goddamn thing. Nobody has to abide by it and nobody has to care. And that's one of the problems. Unless it's the way the game works, your player-derived rules don't mean a goddamn thing. Just because one player walks into a dungeon and says to you, hey, you know what? I'm here to do this, and you have to abide by that rule. Well, no, I don't. That's your rule. It's nothing to do with me. I haven't decided on that, and I certainly haven't agreed to it. I don't have to do a damn thing that you want me to do. Player-derived rules are all well and good, and most of them are actually beneficial. The need before greed system, or main spec over off spec, whatever you want to call it, would actually be a great thing if everybody abided by it. It would be a great thing. It would be cool. You would roll in on the way you wanted to go. If you wanted to try a new spec, then you would spec that way and get to learn it in the process. All these things are actually good ideas in principle, but unfortunately, like most things, they're not enforced by anybody who has any authority, and therefore it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. This is why we have the LFR system, where in fact the players were uncontrollable. The players were running amok, and there was players needing on loot they already had. The Dragon Soul LFR loot system was in fact absolute chaos because of people who are essentially dicks. Let's face facts, that's what they are. They're essentially dicks who would easily roll on loot to trade it to their friends. I can't say I wasn't a part of this. If I went in with some friends on a really max geared character, let's say I took my Warlock, who's Dragon Soul Heroic geared to the teeth, I would roll in with some friends, and sure, I would roll on a cloth item and I would trade it to my friends. Why the hell shouldn't I? That is the way the game works. I could be called a dick for that, but I'm not exactly the only one who was doing that, and it was pretty normal. Unfortunately, you had super dicks mixed in there as well, who would quite easily roll on items they already had in order to vendor it. Yeah, that's being a super dick. There are levels of being a dick, and that is the worst kind. There was lots and lots of opportunities of that happening, especially if you had some of the hybrid specs. You would have the druids rolling in there with max geared characters, just needing all the LFR gear so they could try out Cat once and then not play it again. But whatever, that was the way the looting worked, and you had no decision to override them. As much as you could stamp your feet and complain, they didn't have to do a goddamn thing to trade it back to you. Same thing with the World First Race. Now, why is this a problem? The World First Race actually inspires people, and this is one of the big things that I work towards in what I do in my content, is to inspire people to be better at the game. A lot of people think that when the game was harder, everybody was a better player. That is just not true. Vanilla had its fair share of awful, awful players. TBC had its fair share of awful, awful players. In fact, the level of terribleness has only decreased ever so slightly since Vanilla to now. And why is that? The only slight decrease is because there is little or no inspiration to actually become better. A lot of people are motivated by gear. I don't mind that. I used to be motivated by gear too. There was something pretty special in your own mind and the pride to be taken when your gear was noticeably different than other people. If you were to stand next to somebody, say on my tier 6 geared to the teeth warrior, or dripping in Sunwell gear as he was, next to somebody who just started raiding SSC, there was a noticeable difference there, and people used to take inspiration from that. I know that when I saw my first character in Vanilla, who was rolling around in Blackwing Lair gear, I was like, wow, I need to be that guy. That was how I got inspired to start PvEing. I saw people rolling in these lovely purples, doing things that I just possibly couldn't do, and it inspired me to work harder and become better at the game. There's nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being inspired to try and get better gear, and along the way you learn to be a better player. Of course, there are many people who just want better gear without actually trying and do the guild hopping trick, but that tends to get stomped out quickly. Again, the category of the super dick. Player drive rules are a pain in the ass, and it doesn't matter how we do this. The only problem we have now is that the World First Race is now so small. It is absolutely insignificantly small compared to what it used to be. And then basically, if you look at 10 man, it's a 1-horse race, and 25 man is what, 2 people? Blood Legion and Method, that was it. There's not much inspiration to be like that, especially if you can roll into LFR, and with a little bit of luck on your side, you can have a gear that looks exactly the same as theirs does anyway. So you don't care. There's no inspiration to be better. It's easier to do it the other route. I don't have to give up my work to come home and do an LFR at the weekend and roll with a lot of coins. I don't have to do that. I have to do a few dailies. And that's the only problem for me. It's a means to an end. I don't care particularly about the world first race anymore. I enjoy it on a personal level. I enjoy watching the guys try hard. I enjoy seeing that kill, especially when it comes down to who will defeat the last boss first, and there's two guys racing at it, and you know they're all working hard. Personally, from experience, I love that, but the majority of the player base doesn't give a shit. And when they do give a shit, it's always biased and twisted. Of course, if Paragon gains the world first, then they were the best, and if Method gains the world first, then 10 Man is broken. All player community ideas aside, it's very difficult to gain a balanced perspective to those guys. What we would like to see is many competitors in there, allowing for the possible opportunity for them to move up. On top of that, we would also like to see it accessible. What's happened is the players have made it inaccessible. It no longer matters if you are a great player. If you're a great player but you have a baby who needs attention during the day at some point, then you can no longer be part of that race because you need to be able to dedicate your time and effort during that short period, and it is only a short period when new tier content comes out, in order to take part. If you say you can't attend during the days during that week, then you're useless to that guild because that's when they'll be raiding, and you can't blame them for it either. What we can say is the world first race is definitely debatably broken right now, and it's not great. We want to see more people in there. We want it to be more accessible. Can Blizzard do anything about it? Not really, not without completely restricting how often you could be in the dungeon. How often can you be in the raid? And that's just purely unfair to the guys who want to do it that way. That's just not the way it goes. You're now, let's say you can only access the dungeon between, say, the hours of 6 PM and 10 PM. Well, what about the people who actually work at that time? They still raid, they raid with their buddies, but they raid at sort of 12 PM till 3 PM before they start work. You're now telling them they're not allowed to raid in your dungeon. You can't do it. You can't do it. It is the players that have caused this problem, and there's no easy solution to this, not without unfathomable restrictions that just make any sense. Every time Blizzard has tried to restrict it, it has been met with circumvention, which is again a player-derived way of playing. In ICC, they say there's limited attempts on these bosses, such as Professor Putricide or Blood Queen. You have limited tries, and okay, the big guilds say, alright then, well we'll just make another group of players. We'll just re-roll our exact same class again, and go ahead, and we'll try it on those guys, and then we'll come in on our mains and one-shot it, and not use any of the other skills. It's all player-derived. The only problem is, and I don't particularly care, and there's a lot of people going here now, yeah, well, who cares what the world first guys do? It's not about what those guys do. It's about making sure that the community has someone to look forward to and a possibility of it being accessible to them. That inspires players to be better. It's overall better for the game. What we don't like is the world first race goes ahead and then people go, oh, well, they raided 17 hours a day. I can't possibly do that. These guys are nerdy low-lifers. Why would I ever want to be like them? That is the problem. But again, player-derived rules, not going to happen. Our next question came in from Adam. Paula Preach. I have a quick question for you. I was watching the daily the other day and I heard you say Shadow Priests pretty low at the minute and Mages and Locks are in a great place. In my 25 man, I'm on nearly every fight. I'm kicking their ass. We are in a mid-level guild, currently 2 out of 13 heroic. Not awful, but not method. I was just wondering, is that because they're slacking, suck, or not sounding arrogant? I'm pretty good. Here's the logs, etc, etc. The ultimate question. Am I awesome or do I suck? It's a tough question. It really is. It's not an easy question, especially when you can't relate to anybody. When you can't compare yourself. Little bit tricky to decide this. And this is the kind of question that comes up when you consider changing guilds, right? This is a question. Am I ready? Am I good enough? I don't know what to do. It's a weird one. I have a direct experience with this. I was a member of this crew. I was a member of the... I am so fucking good at this game, it's retarded. They're like, I can't even imagine that anybody in the game is equally as good as I am. In fact, this happened during my mid-level stint guilds, during the early Burning Crusade, the very early first tiers towards tier 6-ish, just before tier 6, before I joined my first major endgame guild. I was a tank, and I was, as far as I was concerned, super fucking amazing. Nobody could beat me. No one could ever pull aggro off me. I was awesome. I was the king of the world. Yeah. In fact, you start feeling like maybe you're too good for that guild. Or maybe you're doing something nobody else isn't. Well, firstly, let's get down to common sense. If you're playing a class that realistically shouldn't be the top of the DPS, and you are, It is not likely because you are doing something that nobody else has ever thought of. That's just not the way the game works. So a lot of people like to believe, maybe I'm just playing better than all those top guys in the world who are getting the world #1 spots. Maybe I'm just playing better than them, and if I had their gear, I would be dominating. No, that's just not the case. It's really not. What it tends to be in mid-level guilds is that ultimately you might be better than the other players and they're making lots of mistakes. That's not particularly likely in a 25-man. You're usually going to be competing with 1 or 2 players who are also pretty good. You'll actually find tremendous players, absolutely tremendous players dotted about various guilds. Each guild has one or a couple. You guys know who they are, who are just really good players. And they always perform every time you're in the raid. That might even be you. Unfortunately, it's not the best place to draw a comparison in a mid-level guild, because if you are a mid-level guild, that's for a number of reasons. Now, that reason could be that you raid once every 2 weeks, or you raid whenever anybody happens to be online. Ergo, you're not going to be completing many bosses. That's just the way it goes. Or it's because generally everybody around you tends to make those little mistakes, those little errors that cause you problems every now and again. And that's kind of the big thing that draws a lot of people away, is because when those little errors are happening across the whole guild, is those little errors turn into quite big errors that prevent you getting from good boss kills. That's what happens. And then you start the, I don't have enough gear, the raid doesn't have enough gear, we'll get there in a bit of time. And while, yes, gear does allow you to cover several mistakes, if players keep making those little mistakes, you can only guarantee that gear will carry you past X boss, and then the problems will start again on Y boss, where you start needing more and more gear to cover up the errors on those, especially if it's a difficult boss. One thing I could tell you is if you are constantly outperforming everybody on a class that shouldn't. Now, what is a class that shouldn't? I suppose we should answer that. It's very good to be constantly checking yourself on things like World of Logs. And I don't mean checking yourself personally, checking where your class is. Especially if you're a DPSer. It's always worthwhile going, what are the people doing with my class? What are the top geared people doing? Where do they lie in comparison to everybody else? And if your class is one of those that currently is sitting in the middle of the pack, and there are other classes that are way outperforming you on a regular basis, let's say your maximum potential DPS for something like Jinrock the Breaker is around 170k DPS. That's your maximum potential. Some player in the world has managed to attain 170k DPS. And then you go ahead and you check something like a Warlock, and there are hundreds of them that are way over 200k DPS. And lots of them. Well, that's a swift difference. If there are hundreds of players constantly beating the DPS that the maximum best luck try that one of your class has done, then of course the Warlocks in general should either be with you or ahead of you. And if they are not, then that's actually a problem with that player. Okay? It makes simple sense. Of course, you can disregard factors like you suddenly have amazing gear in comparison. If you're raiding in epics and the other guy's wearing blues, you're likely to beat him. This situation where you're constantly topping yourself is actually a very comfortable situation. It actually can lead you to become worse as a player. I noticed this. when I left the World First race and joined a sort of, not a mid-level guild, but I would call a high-end guild in the top 100. Top 100, and the difference between a World First and a top 100 guild is a world of difference. When I joined them and things were a little bit more relaxed, the mistakes were a little bit more frequent, and players weren't exactly pushing themselves to the max, I actually found it very comfortable. Very comfortable. And I was at least wise enough to know that that's because I could get away with more. I can get away with more mistakes. And I did noticeably realise that I was responding slightly slower to certain things and wasn't caring too much about lining up everything up perfectly, because I would still, you know, be top of the DPS or close to it. And everybody was fine with that. If you're near the top of the DPS, no one really complains. So I found that happening. This is a decision you have to make. If you're comfortable and you're happy with the raiding times and you're happy with everything that goes on in your guild, then stay there. If you're looking to move forward, you should realise that you should not be the top of the DPS. If you're playing a class that shouldn't be top of the DPS, and you always are, and you're looking for a little bit of faster progress, it's time to move on, because realistically speaking, you can kind of draw conclusions that the rest of your DPS are in fact holding down the progress of your guild, because they should be higher. And that's just the way of things. They should be higher. It's facts. A lot of people can find arguments backwards and forwards of how to defend this, but they should be higher. That is just the way it is. Make a decision. It's not for me to say, yeah, you're really good. Because if you move to a better guild, you won't be really good anymore. When I moved to my better guild, I wasn't really good anymore. In fact, there were players better than me, and that made me work harder. That is the only way you can get better. But if you're comfortable, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't look for EP stroking, which is generally what you're looking for, is for someone to go, wow, you're totally amazing. Yeah, you're totally amazing in a mid-level guild. You need to take it with a pinch of salt. You need to take that with a pinch of salt and not let your ego go out of control, because that's what happened to me, and it doesn't end well. You, in fact, lose a lot of friends and make a lot of enemies along the way if you behave that way, and it's not something I completely recommend. That's me with the questions today. I hope to get some more of these out. I actually quite enjoyed doing that. Let me know the feedback. Do you like this style of stuff? Do you want the answers shorter? I kind of feel I ran on a little bit long. I can get a little bit long-winded sometimes, but that's just the way I am. I'll try and shorten them down if you think so. Alright, guys, you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.